I would just like to comment on what you just said. My son is now in 8th grade, and when he started kindergarten, there was an article that was written about kids going to school with food allergies, and they interviewed me, and there were so many misquotes, and the article was terrible. But for the most part, it had, information about food allergies. And that instilled weeks of people writing to the editor about my kid should be homeschooled, blah, 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 and it was awful. It was, thank God for politics, because it was the only thing that stopped all those letters. And this one mother wrote about her child having his Cheez-Its taken away because they weren't on the safe list. It wasn't in my son's classroom, but she was inferring that because this kid is there, her son can't have Cheez-Its. And then someone else wrote back, blasting this woman, and several people blasted this woman for what she wrote against my child. And she called me one day in tears and said, "Can we meet for coffee?" And I said, "Sure." And my husband said, "How could you even be civil to her? I would have ripped her, And I said, I have to. My goal is to educate her and let her understand what the seriousness of the problem is. If I screamed at her or, said to, gee, that was really a rotten thing you did, I had to have her in my court. And by having her in my court, boy, by the end of that coffee, this woman was sobbing. And she was now an ally to help educate other people at the school about my son. And just one other quick thing I wanted to comment on when you talked about educating others in the classroom. One of my older children did a seniors, in the high school, they have to do a senior project, and he did educating kids in the elementary school for food allergies. And he did this big poster of magazine cutouts of little kids, and one was in a wheelchair, one was a little kid with red hair with freckles, and so on. You get the idea. So he went around saying, "Okay, who can find the little boy with red hair and freckles?" And Susie would raise her hand, saying, "Oh, right there." And so they went around the circle, and then finally he said, "Okay, who can find the boy with the food allergies?" And no one knew which kid it was. So it was kind of like, see, everyone has something. Here's the one in the wheelchair. You can't tell which one it is with the food allergies. And I think it was a very worthwhile lecture for the kids. That,
yeah, that's wonderful.
you have to be empathetic to everybody. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that is an issue with food allergies. We don't look, someone with a food allergy doesn't look sick, and they're not sick, but you don't see that they have this, just like a child with asthma, you don't know that they have asthma until they start wheezing. And so sometimes it is difficult, and that's where some of the children's frustration comes from too. But it is about teaching compassion, and in reality, I think the world as a whole needs to
I just want to add one more thing with that, because that whole thing when parents were coming into the classroom for a back to school night, some parents were saying, "Why do we have to wash our hands?" And one of the little kids said, "Because we have a kid in the class that has food allergies and you have to clean your hands." So it was the kids telling these parents that were all kind of disgruntled about using a baby wipe. It was interesting.
Yeah. Kids will, in a nice setting, in a nice classroom setting where the teacher is really supportive, they will do that. They will kind of go to the opposite and protect their friend, just like that child who was trying to be protected when she was out to dinner with her friend. Just, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She wasn't doing that in a negative way. She was trying to be helpful and protective. So kids will do that if we teach them how to do it appropriately.